Okay, year 11. Another concept which we've been covering is around data structures. So, when we're looking at data types, underneath data types comes a concept called data structures. And they include one-dimensional arrays, which we've spoken about in a couple of previous lessons, and records. Okay, so what we spoke about the other day is that a variable could have many different data types. It could be, a string. It could be an integer. It could be a floating point, okay? It can hold a maximum of one value at any one time. I can write over it all the time, but can only store one value. What happens if one value isn't enough? How could I store like a list of items that are all related to one another? This is what I store in something called an array. A single dimensional array, and the reason why I call it single dimensional is next year we'll learn about multi-dimensional. A single or one-dimensional array is a data structure that consists of a collection of values of the same data type. So all strings, all integers, all floating points, yeah? Each value is identified by an index. So if I had a variable called name, and in that variable was Bob, and I went print name, my programming language would know exactly what to do because there's only one value. But what happens if I had an array, and instead of having one value, it had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 values? Okay, my array has an identifier, like a variable would, and it's called names. How would I identify Kate, for example? Okay, now Kate is number 1, 2, 3 in the list. Okay, and now we have a new subject-specific term. Okay, Kate is actually the third index. Each value is identified by this new concept, which is called an index. Kind of like a book index would tell you what page number. An index says this is the position in which this is located. So rather than just simply saying print, names, which would give me all of these, if I only wanted to print one or to reference one, I would say I'd call it by its index. So for Bob here in this example, I would go names 1, print names 1. Names is the name of my array. In brackets afterwards is the index. That would print Bob. For example, to print Kate or to reference Kate, I would again write names and then in brackets her index, which would be 3. Okay. To print Francis, for example, I would write print names, the name of my array, in brackets 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, in brackets 7. That would print Francis. Okay. The next concept that you need to understand is, okay, a variable's really good for one value, an array is really good for a list of values of the same data type, but what happens if they're not all the same data type? Okay. An array of records contains data that's related but not necessarily of the same data type. So think, for example, your student record. You might have a NESA number, a first name, a last name, a date of birth, and units that you're enrolled in. Okay. An array of records is referenced by the array name, the index, and then the field. So, say I had a list of everyone in our class, okay, and there's 15, 16 people in our class, I think, okay? I would have their NESA numbers, their first name, their last name, their date of birth, and how many units they're enrolled in. Say Adrian, yes, Adrian, I'm picking on you. Say Adrian was the 5th person in this array of records, okay? And the array of records was called students. I would reference first this name of the array of records, students. I would say index number 5, say that was Adrian, and I wanted to pull his first name. I'd write a dot, first name, and that would return a value of Adrian. Say Braith, and yes, Braith, I'm picking on you. Say Braith was after Adrian, yeah? And I wanted to pull Braith's Nessa number. I would first reference students, the 6th index, because he was straight away after Adrian, 6 dot the field that I'm after, Nessa number, okay? Say Victor. Victor, I would like to pull Victor's last name. Victor's the 2nd index in my array of records. I would go students, 2. What did I say I wanted from Victor? Can't even remember. Say, Victor, I wanted your date of birth. I would go students 2 DOB, and that would give me Victor's date of birth. And I could do this for everyone in the class, but say Christian was the 8th person. Students, brackets 8, and I wanted to find Christian's units enrolled. I would go units. Okay, again, I would probably not have spaces between these things because we learnt about spaces and how they're bad. Units enrolled. Okay, you guys in the tutorials that you have coming up with VB.net will look at a couple of things to do with arrays. As of yet, we don't touch arrays of records, but you can 100% look into arrays of records. For some of you that want to put, some of you who may want to store Frodo's data, may want to store it in a file in an array of records, okay? And this is something that in the coming weeks, you guys can look into. And that's it, guys. That's data structures.